the final moments of Yakuza 5, Haruka Sawamura stands in front of a crowd of 5,000 adoring fans at Japan's Tokyo Dome for what is to be her big idol debut, televised to millions across the country. With the nation's attention resting all on her, she declares that she will be retiring from show business to be with Kazuma Kiryu, former 4th chairman of the Tojo clan and her foster father. As her speech concludes, she runs off backstage with great haste and only one thing in mind. Staggering alongside a nondescript snowy road, Kiryu, having just defeated Misao Aizawa, struggles with an open gun wound. He collapses to the ground, and just in that moment, Haruka appears, reuniting them for the first time after a long and arduous 2 years. He utters, "A dream? Am I dreaming?" "No," she responds. "I'm right here with you," just before succumbing to his wound and passing out. The camera pans, and Yakuza 5 ends. This scene may just be a small moment of bliss in what is Yakuza's most tragic tale, but it also signifies a very serious problem with the Kiryu and Haruka dynamic. You see, a lot of people are under the impression that Haruka's idol pursuit was a lie, and throwing it all away to be with Kiryu reinforces the notion that this was the real truth she was looking for. Her actual dream in a game all about dreams.
Yume.
But the reality of the situation is that her actions are a byproduct of her unchecked codependency. And before anyone says I'm looking too deep into this, let me explain. Like many mental disorders, codependency cannot be described as one thing, rather a variety of characteristics. At best, it can be clarified as a behavioral condition that relies on excess emotional or psychological reliance on a person, process, or substance. When it involves a person, be it a romantic partner, family, or work relationship, codependent relationships are often one-sided, as that person can abuse or actively enable the other person's codependency. With the codependent serving the role of caretaker, supporter, or confidant, they may find themselves self-sacrificing their own needs to instead satisfy the priorities of others, as they feel responsible for that person's feelings, thoughts, or actions. So how does this pertain to Haruka? Well, to give a little refresher on Kiryu and Haruka's relationship, Haruka was caught in the middle of a citywide Yakuza conspiracy. Known as the 10 billion yen girl, all eyes were set on her. By pure chance, Kiryu would find a frightened Haruka clutching to a gun and surrounded by dead bodies, only to discover that both of their goals aligned. Kiryu wants to find his lost love Yumi, and Haruka wants to find her mother Mizuki, presumably Yumi's sister. It's later revealed that Mizuki was Yumi all along, and their journey ends when Haruka's father Jingu fatally shoots Yumi and is stabbed by Kiryu's oath brother Nishiki, who makes the ultimate sacrifice by detonating a bomb, killing himself and Jingu. With Haruka being the only person he has left to fight for, Kiryu takes it upon himself to raise her as his daughter. Now you wouldn't be wrong to assume that these events would leave Haruka visibly traumatized, and to much surprise, Haruka doesn't develop post-traumatic flashbacks from it. But you would also be a fool to believe that it didn't leave a significant impression on her either. Look at this scene here in Yakuza 2, where Haruka rejects the producer's offer to turn her into a child star. Now, whether or not the producer's intentions are all well and good is unimportant, but to go along with the main point of this video, it's often pointed here as an example that she has no interest in show business because she says she wants to be with Kiryu. And that statement is all true, but you can't take it at face value, because it's not that Haruka just wants to be with Kiryu. Haruka adamantly does not want to be abandoned by him, and that's a huge difference. In fact, if you go back and watch this scene, Haruka says some damning things here. "If you leave me, I'll find you my own. I'll go all the way to Kamurocho to find you." When Kiryu tries to confront her about the danger he brings, she says she's not scared at all, as Kiryu's always there to keep her safe. These are all things no 10-year-old should be saying, and while this scene more so highlights just how strong of a bond Haruka and Kiryu have, it plants the seed for what's to come. Because what's cute at 10 years old would be detrimental at 16, as she would continue to throw her life away, had it not been for Ray Park, whose methods were, albeit cold and forceful. But before we go into that, let's actually talk about Kiryu for a second. Kazuma Kiryu, the man, the myth, the legend himself. The Tojo clan's very own Dragon of Dojima and former 4th chairman. This man is arguably the most high-profile person in Japan's criminal underworld, and yet he decides to run an orphanage? Don't get me wrong, this is by far one of my most favorite aspects of his character. Name another video game protagonist who runs an orphanage and loves his kids the way Kiryu does. But it's without a doubt incredibly irresponsible to endanger the life of these kids knowing the position he holds, similar to that of a superhero dating normal people trope. If you need a good reason why this is bad, then look no further than Goro Majima, who does the exact opposite of what Kiryu does. Majima is a walking tragedy. but he hides it under a facade while keeping everyone at arm's length from him so they're not swept up into his dangerous life. Now I flip-flop whether Kiryu is aware of the gravity of his situation, and I've come to the conclusion that yes, he does. But he's never considered the repercussions beyond just that of physical safety. Because as poor as this reason may sound, Kiryu is just fucking dense. But all that changes with Moroi Park. Park's introduction is like a bulldozer. She's meant to disrupt the very foundation of the happy family we've grown accustomed to, without even as much as lifting a finger. But she's not in the wrong either. Remember when I said that Kiryu's awareness of his reputation doesn't extend past the physical safety of his children? That's because in Yakuza 4, Kiryu gives this speech to Saejima explaining how guys like them are bounded by fate, basically admitting that they can never really escape the Yakuza life. Park, however, brings to light a more pressing matter, one that's out of Kiryu's control. The kids, subconsciously, idolize Kiryu to an unhealthy degree. Orphans with parents absent from their lives, Kiryu provided the paternal love that they were missing, so naturally they sought to him as their main and only source of happiness. When your reason to live is reliant on another living or breathing person, the fear is that one day they will leave you, and if so, well, that's just not a possibility that the kids were willing to bear. To them, Morning Glory was like heaven on earth, and Kiryu was essentially God. If it meant keeping the status quo, then they were willing to give up their aspirations and independence for it. Thus, this is the place where dreams go to die. From Park's perspective, having been an orphan herself, she recognized a problem she was all too familiar with, and gave each and every kid the opportunity to escape it. Because you have to remember that Park was also funding the futures of every one of the kids at Morning Glory, something Kiryu couldn't have done as they were severely underfunded. Keep in mind that Haruka was also present during this conversation too. Notice that she's relieved when Kiryu initially rejects Park's ultimatum, but begins to question her dreams when aspirations are brought up. We're talking about the two most stubborn characters in Yakuza. The fact that they're even separated at the start of 5 to begin with shows what little holds Park had in an argument. Kiryu may be stubborn, but he's not unintelligent, and the Haruka that we know wasn't going to give up without a good reason, and this was that reason. With all this in mind, Kiryu has no choice but to forfeit his role as caretaker of Morning Glory. He moves to Fukuoka where he becomes a taxi driver and adopts the name Taichi Suzuki, and throughout the course of the game, he makes a conscious effort not to make any direct contact with Haruka and the orphans, which plays a huge part in how Kiryu thinks. Little things like sending money to Morning Glory via ATM, or getting Baba-chan to deliver Haruka a message for something as simple as never give up, to which she remarks that he could have just called, but we're shown exactly why he doesn't. Near the end of the game, it takes a mere glimpse of Kiryu on the TV for Haruka to throw the entire concert away. At this point, Haruka doesn't even know that Kiryu was fighting for her sake, but it was enough to make her change her mind completely. Park isn't without some noticeable caveats either, but I'm willing to stick my neck out and say that they were rather harmless. You see, Park does this weird thing where she projects her own painful upbringings onto Haruka. For someone who claims to have done a very thorough research on her, she would have known that Haruka's life has been fairly normal, aside from the frequent kidnappings. On my first playthrough, I thought this was a manipulative tactic to bring Haruka down to her level, but there's very little evidence to imply this, and I can only assume she just genuinely sees herself in Haruka. Now what I'm about to say next I have to be really careful with, because it could really make or break my argument as it falls in the realm of speculation. I want to be 100% transparent on this channel, and I'm not about to cop out and say Yakuza 5 has poor writing. It has some flaws, but I believe everything to suggest Haruka having severe codependency and that Park had everyone's best interests was fully realized in the final product. So another thing that Park does is threaten to pull funding out of Morning Glory, should Haruka sway her decision or for something as little as not giving it her all in a game of Taiko Drum Master. I believe there's enough evidence to suggest that these were nothing more than empty threats, as Park was 100% confident that things would go smoothly for Haruka's big idol debut, and that she just didn't account for herself dying and for Haruka to change her mind last minute. Given how much she busted her ass to obtain the 300 million yen, and the good word Akiyama gives to her name, I have a hard time believing failure was ever an option to her. It's a morbid trick to motivate her star people, but at the end of the day, she's still running a business here. So I hope by now I've not been mistaken as disliking the ending of 5, because despite everything I've just talked about, I think it's the most appropriate development for Kiryu and Haruka given the events of that game. While Kiryu distancing himself from Haruka's life is the right move, the predicaments of Yakuza 5 were simply not the way to wrap the bow on that relationship, and RGG Studios knew that. You would think if they at least changed the tone of this scene, it would better paint the severity of their situation, but I'd argue that it just wasn't one of their priorities. I don't think Yakuza is a series that goes out of its way to be deceiving with its story. Its gameplay, however, is a whole other topic. I also believe we should be mature enough to recognize when a relationship is toxic, while also having empathy to understand just how much these characters have been through without the use of dramatic music. I think the moment where Kiryu and Haruka reunite was always going to be treated with the same tenderness and care that those two are usually given, so to present that scene as something sinister would have been highly inappropriate. You might also be wondering why I haven't mentioned Yakuza 6, as the beginning of that game follows immediately after Yakuza 5, showing the ramifications of Haruka's public announcement. That's because Yakuza 6 doesn't build on what you should already know about her codependency. Her being harassed by the paparazzi and telling herself that she should have never came back does not tell us anything new. However, if we apply what we've learned so far, then we can at least look at Yakuza 6's ending in two ways. Not only is Kiryu's decision to fake his death a way to protect his family, but it's also Kiryu's way of letting Haruka settle down with her husband and son, and put priorities where they actually matter. This is the Haruka that threw everything away at a drop of a hat, so imagine what she'd do if she even got a hint that Kiryu was alive. The goal of this video wasn't to vilify Haruka, nor was it to paint Kiryu as an active enabler. Rather, I felt compelled to make this video because it's a topic sorely absent within the fanbase. Scoured through the many online discussions about 5 and its ending, from original release to remastered, and it's usually posts about how much of a bitch Park was, or how stupid teenage Haruka is compared to child Haruka, which I don't think you could solidly argue that the decisions someone makes as a teen demonstrates that they were less smart than they were as a child. However, there is a distinct lack of discussion surrounding the actual consequences of Kiryu and Haruka's relationship, and I at least wanted to open up that discussion, even if it's in a small corner of the internet. I don't view myself as having a higher opinion, but I have a major problem when a toxic relationship is painted as heartfelt. Relationships like these happen in real life, maybe not between a reformed Yakuza and a little girl, but amongst the people closest to you, and I think it's important that we recognize them as dangerous before it's too late. By now, if you haven't been convinced of the glaring issues that plague the Kiryu and Haruka dynamic, then fine, you're free to feel however you want, but at least let me leave you with this. If you've played Haruka's chapter in 5, then you would have known just how satisfying it was to watch Haruka blossom outside of her comfort zone. Watching Haruka gain new friends and make new life experiences are some of the most gratifying moments in the entire series. So to say that this was all a lie and that her true dream was to be with Kiryu, I think you're lying to yourself, and a little too complacent with handicapping a child on the verge of becoming an adult. Being an idol wasn't the problem, masking her insecurities in the name of family was. It was a way to deceive herself as a reason to keep on living. Never mind what career she would have pursued, she was never going to fully commit to a path that didn't involve Kiryu, and that's what I want more people to realize. What a character wants, no. What a person says they want is a lot different from what a person needs. Simply put, no one person should devote their life for another. Everyone needs to learn to let go.